meetup. Really excited to have you all here. For those who maybe haven't joined before, we've been doing these meetups once a month since about the beginning of the pandemic as a way for nurses to come together, provide support, mentorship, connections, networking, etc. I didn't even introduce myself. I'm sorry. I'm Marion Leary. I am one of the I'm on the board of Ciox, one of the founders of the group, and I'm really happy to be here with all of you tonight. I'm also on with my other board member, and other Ciox members are on as well, if you guys want to introduce yourselves.
Sure. So I'm Mary Lou Ackerman. I'm one of the board members and one of the founding members of Ciox, leading the Canadian arm of this amazing group, and really have enjoyed every moment that I've been able to participate in all the activities we're doing and all the planning and strategy and stuff. So I'm really happy to be here. Are there any other board members on or members?
There are. Julie is on.
Hi, it's Julia Cooney. Welcome everyone. Delighted to be here. I am also a board member and a founding Ciox individual. So delighted to be here with you all tonight.
Cool. Anybody else from Ciox want to say hi?
Hi, everyone. I'm Rhonda Manns. I'm here in Atlanta, Georgia, also a board member here and a founding member of Ciox as well. Very newest edition, and very glad to see everybody, familiar faces in the audience.
Yeah, great to see you, Rhonda. Yay.
Yay. Cool. So we started something new this year with our meetups. We're doing these guest talks, and this month we actually have a guest panel. So it's really exciting, and we'll have the guest panelists speak, and then we'll have time at the end for our regular meetup networking event as well. So I guess I'll pass it over to Mary Lou, who will introduce the panelists.
Excellent. Great. Yeah, I was really fortunate to be connected with Joanna Seltzer, who helped us bring this panel together. So we do have three nurses who are, really driven to transform healthcare with their compassion for people, but along with their passion for innovation. So Joanna is going to take a few minutes to introduce them, but I'll just introduce Joanna for you. So it's Joanna Seltzer Uribe. And I think I've said that correctly because I got this little how to actually say it, which was very helpful. Thank you for sending. And this is kind of interesting too. She's a yoga nurse informaticist. So I think we have to hear a little bit more about what that is. A founding member of Ciox and currently a doctorate of education candidate in organizational change. She's led design thinking, curriculum revisions at the New York University Royers-Myers College of Nursing in the graduate and undergraduate programs. And last year was part of the winning hackathon teams at Nurse Hack for Health and the MIT Hacking Racism in Healthcare. She's currently the project lead of the Nurses You Should Know project and a Johnson & Johnson Nurse Innovation Fellow. So on that note, I'll hand it over to Joanna to introduce our speakers for tonight.
Thank you so much. And I want to thank Tatiana and Charlene and Vanessa for being here. I know that nurses on this call know that, it's like an orbit, and you kind of like, whether it's in school, whether it's, in work, you just meet people and then you just stay in touch with them and you watch their career unfold, and that's really how I feel. And I'm so excited to present Tatiana and Charlene and Vanessa because I've seen them go from grad school, and in one case Tatiana had even interviewed me for a job and that's how we met. And recently meeting Charlene and seeing her go from hackathon to beta testing her first product. So it's really amazing to get everyone together and to hear the different themes of their stories and how they came into nursing and how they really wove and redefined the careers and the pathways that were unique for them. So to start off, I'm going to introduce Tatiana Arreglado, and she is a EPIC site director of clinical informatics and analytics and reporting currently at Harlem Hospital. And Tatiana, I'll have you fill in all the gaps and tell everyone about your nursing journey.
Thank you, Joanna, and thank you for inviting me to speak and talk about, my experience and my journey from nursing and informatics. So I started informatics really in 2008 at Montefiore, but I was a programmer first, and then 9/11 happened. So I wanted to volunteer and for the American Red Cross, but they wouldn't take me because I didn't have any medical background or any medical background at all. So I'm like, okay, well, 5 years from now, you're going to take me as part of your medical team. So then I went to nursing, and sure enough, the combination of my IT background and nursing really, sort of like interwoven, like very seamlessly. It was just a constant. It was just an immediate, intermingling of two professions that I have. And so I heard about informatics, and I didn't really know about what I was getting into, but since I love technology and I love nursing as well, I applied to Montefiore for a position as a clinical coordinator. So that meant I had to build something in for the EMR that we used. I can't remember what we had then, but anyway, so that was my start of my informatics career in 2008. And then I heard about Epic and how Epic pretty much, is taking over the EMR world. So I decided to just leave Montefiore and just go to Mount Sinai and become an analyst and learn Epic. So I pretty much built the, emergency, the ASAP module in Mount Sinai. And then they needed someone to lead the nursing informatics, the first ever nursing informatics at Mount Sinai. So I took on that role. So I had 8 informaticists reporting under me. And this is a new thing for Mount Sinai, really creating the program and making sure that we had a solid program for nursing informatics. But then at that point, I just really wanted to learn about population health. And that's when I actually met Joanna, because I took on a consulting role. And I thought that was exciting. Consulting is really great because I get to travel then. So I took a startup role as a director for programs, and I went to California, and we had a proprietary application for population health. And what was nice about it was all my clients were back on the East Coast, and I was stuck in California, which I didn't quite like California. But going back to the East Coast was wonderful. And so one of my clients was Puerto Rico, which was amazing because I get to spend at least, a week every month in Puerto Rico. And but then I thought, well, I love the consulting, but then I really want to get back into Epic world. So I went on to do consulting and took more certifications for Epic modules. And then since I've gotten all of these, certifications in Epic, I just thought, hey, I'll just go back to New York because I do miss I miss New York. So I went back to New York and then just settled here again and took a job at NYU, and then analytics and reporting opened up at Harlem Hospital, and that's where I really wanted to pretty much be at, in terms of my career. I love data. I mean, I've been programming and I've been creating data. I've been, creating databases and really looking at data. And so I took on that role at Harlem for data analytics and reporting. And that's where I am right now. So I am at Harlem Hospital, but since I have a lot of Epic experience, and we had just went live in Epic, and I thought maybe I was sort of like a default Epic Psych director. So that's what I'm doing. I concentrate on, I actually focus on optimization of Epic in Harlem, and making sure that all our users are, especially nurses, are efficiently using our system. And also with that, I partner with a lot with our providers as well as nursing to look at data and make sure that to improve our processes and also to improve our care. And I love the fact that, I get to really change the way we practice medicine, the way we practice our nursing, and also, making sure that our community are served. Because we do have a lot of our community, the underserved community in Harlem, and we pretty much, I make sure through our data, I make sure that they are really, followed up and taken care of. Yeah, so that's that was my journey from a programmer to nursing and informatics. And, I'm always, like up for learning, and I always come up with, applications that can improve our processes, whether or not I have to create it in like just regular Access database or Excel, and just to make sure that, our users are, using our systems efficiently, and, looking at data. So, and dashboards, certainly, I create dashboards as well for our users. And, and I think, this nursing informatics, and it's like, it's so open, it's so broad for everyone, like wherever you go or whatever areas you go into, you have an opportunity to really expand your world and really learn and really, take on something that's just not traditional nursing, which is great. I am an ED nurse as well, although I do miss clinical work. And I always say that it's not, so you see a lot of nursing graduates just jumping into informatics and not having that clinical background. And it's kind of tough, because then you have to, in an EMR world, an informatics world, you kind of need to know the clinical aspect and to know that whole clinical workflow, to really understand what the users are experiencing. And I see a lot of new graduates, they just go straight into informatics. And I'm like, well, you kind of really know how to be one of them to help them. So, and it's a long journey for me, and I love it, and I'm still learning, and I'm jumping on to another, hopefully another, phase in my career. I always come up with all of these interesting ideas, I guess, but then, if you're a part of an organization, you're kind of stuck. You don't have a lot of resources, certainly it's a public hospital that I'm in, so you don't have a lot of resources available to you, and there's a lot of, well, you need approval for XYZ, it's it's stuff, you just have, you have a lot of creative ideas, innovation in your head, but then you can't really push them or pursue them because of all of these, approvals and that you have to go through, and but so that is my story. I don't know, I hope I didn't go over my time.
No, that was great, Tatiana. We've got lots of activity in the chat about people really happy to be hearing about an informatics journey, because that is a journey that a lot of nurses, well, I wouldn't say a lot of nurses, but it would be great to have more nurses going down that pathway as well, because it's quite influential. So no, you didn't go over your time. Put in one question. I'm just seeing if there's any others, if others can have a look at that. But I was just wondering if you could highlight why you think it's so important that nurses should be in these positions.
Well, I think in informatics position, yes. So the thing is, if I think they would understand really how nurses' workflows are, and part of it is really being one of them, right? So doing clinical work, and then really understanding what goes on during patient care and using the EMR. So one thing that I've always pushed for is also the responsibility of using the EMR. So a lot of nurses are, I mean, I've observed anyway in my hospital that they just make sure that they lose their critical thinking, and they, once the EMR says, okay, well, yes, go ahead, for example, this medication, yes, give it, and just because the EMR says it's okay, or there's no like pop-ups to say, hey, warning sign, whatever, they pretty much just follow that, and they lose the critical thinking, and that's a big part of really, that's a big part of being an informaticist, is to really teach our users that, no, yes, this is just a tool for us to use to help us with patient care, but you still have to think about what you're doing, have that critical thinking behind, like with you all the time before acting on something. And I see a lot of errors because the EMR says so, like it was okay to give something or do something. But I think I think as an informaticist, and being a nurse and as an informaticist, I think we are able to teach our users that, hey, this is just a tool. And I think, and that's why nursing is also, it's an essential, and being an informatics nurse is essential in a hospital, because understanding all of that and delivering that message, delivering that education to our nurses is very important.
Right. Great. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, I think we, it's really important as nurses that we look at all of these tools as just tools to augment our clinical decision-making. And don't ever let a tool take that away from us. So I think I'm really glad that you raised that point, because we do see that.
Oh yeah.
You talked about how hard it is to change in make change happen in an organization and bring your ideas to the table. That's one of the things that SONCIEL is all about, is helping to influence organizations, giving them the methodologies and tools to drive innovation within their organization. And so we have members and who, that's their role, that's my role, I'm the VP of Innovation at SE Health. So there is ways to do that, and you can hear more about that through some of our channels and events for sure.
Yeah.
We do have one last question from Julia, and it has to do with if you can give an example of the impact nursing informatics has had, whether it's maybe from your work that you did in the ER at Sinai or current work that you're doing now. I think like providing an illustration of maybe a question or a way that you've improved care around a certain population through the analytics or the dashboards that you're creating, that would be really awesome to kind of make that illustrative connection of how it impacts care.
Yeah, certainly with analytics. So analytics is tough too, because you can present your numbers, but if you look at it and people and your users really don't understand how to use it, it's useless. So one thing about nursing, being a nurse informaticist and looking at and doing analytics is that you can sort of explain to nurses, your nurse managers, the numbers. So you can sort of like relate to them based on, you know, since you know the care, you know the workflow, when you explain something on the dashboard, for example, you can explain more on a clinical terms as a nurse. So you're thinking like a nurse and you're explaining as a nurse, which is very important for our nurse managers to really understand what they're looking at. And one thing about this as well is it's very, when somebody talks about care, you know, like how to improve, you know, your processes in the units and stuff, looking at dashboards, it's you sort of like, you become part of that whole process as an informaticist, as a nurse as well. Just being one of them, it makes you sort of like, your words sort of like gets accepted and followed in terms of, you know, what we're doing, what we're looking at, and how are we improving our care.
Nice. Great. Thank you so much, Tatiana. I think we'll move on now to our second speaker. Really appreciate that. Really insightful.
Thank you.
So Joanna, who's up next for us?
Vanessa. I don't have theme music to weave in. But I met Vanessa in my graduate program, and her background is actually in psych nursing. For those on the call that are from UPenn, she's also a UPenn alum. And so she will talk about how she got into nursing, and then how she went from nursing into the psych world, and then from psych into the tech side, and then going into a startup, and then having her startup that she was a part of be acquired. She is currently a vice president of product, and I'll pass the mic.
Sure, thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? I should not have used today to test out my headphones, but of course I would. So hi everyone, my name is Vanessa. So as Joanna mentioned, I really started my nursing journey at the guidance counselor office in high school. And I said, hey, look, my folks are telling me I should become a doctor. Are there any other options that are in healthcare that it's not just this kind of never ending pathway of education, grueling education? And she said, have you ever thought or heard about nursing? And I said, that's fantastic. Sign me up. And I said, how long's the school? And she's like, 4 years. And I was like, done. Lo and behold, I did way more schooling than just the 4 years, of course, eventually. But that's kind of where I started. I actually was super excited coming out of graduation. I was like, yes, I can't wait. I'm licensed now. I can get whatever job I want. And then it was the recession. So as I'm sure you guys were aware, pretty much up and down the tri-state area, the north, south, west, Midwest, none of the hospitals were actually hiring. I remember putting out like just never ending solicitations of my resume out there. No one was hiring new nurses. And so who took me in? Of course, the least served community, one of the few, along with, you know, hospice and things like that. So I said, well, hospice or psych, and I ended up choosing psych because it really spoke to me about mental health hygiene. Is really, really key in a lot of our socioeconomic situations and things like that. And it really spoke more to me than the other side, which is equally as empathetic and loving. It really takes love to serve that community as well. So while I'm in psych, of course, I'm the youngest nurse on the unit, and I'm typically the one that taught the older nurses how to, navigate through the EMR, EHR, and we were using Allscripts at the time. So if you guys don't know much about Allscripts, just know that you could customize anything and everything you could possibly imagine until your eyeballs cross and there's too many colors, right? So that ended up being actually my calling, if you would call it that, where I ended up being a user champion. I started sitting on a lot of the councils or panels where we started talking about how can we reflect mental health status a little bit better in clinical records. Oftentimes it is a very fuzzy narrative when anything outside of, are you having thoughts of suicide or are you having thoughts of hallucinations? That's really it, right? When we talk about discrete fields, are you a smoker? Do you do illicit drugs? And anything around it ends up being very fuzzy. And that was really annoying, personally speaking, because if you then had to look for that value or discrete value after the fact or after the person gets discharged, the patient gets discharged, you end up having to look through the whole record anyways, which is a complete waste of time. So I found informatics by the way of, I had a neighbor, I was very lucky. I had a neighbor who was a medical informaticist at New York Health, New York Presbyterian. And then he was somewhere else at one point, and then he switched around, but he's like, hey, have you heard about, bridging how data and healthcare, that it could actually serve each other a little bit better? How can we really understand the values that we get out of documenting, right? Why are we even documenting? What's the distilled value that comes out of it? So I said, tell me more. And I ended up going over his house for coffee a few times. And he really just explained, like, here are some books that you should check out. Here are some websites for you to look at. Oh, have you heard, there are degrees that go into that. And so that's actually kind of my segue into meeting Joanna, because then I went to NYU for nursing informatics. And at that time, I think the program was relatively new-ish. Our student body was quite small compared to what it is now. People are way more familiar with understanding how data and healthcare are intertwined with one another. Interwoven seems to be a lot of the theme. And so during that journey, I really understood that it's not just easy enough. And I think Tatiana touched upon that. So you saw me nodding ferociously when she was talking, that you have to really understand what's actually happening on the unit at the bedside, and how are folks really documenting things between the physician doing whatever they're doing, all the way to ancillary support folks that are really at the helm of documenting what the patient journey is. All of that ends up becoming an output. And so when you have garbage that's going in, what ends up happening? Garbage comes out. And so you're left with, trying to piece together, well, what actually happened to this patient? Where did they come from? If you have multiple visits across multiple states, not even states, let's say it's the same state, it's a different hospital system, a different insurance company, right? That's really the crux of the challenge. And it spoke to me, which was kind of messed up. Maybe I'm a masochist when it comes to solving problems. But ultimately, I did take a position at New York Presbyterian. So I was at New York Presbyterian for Psych, and I transferred into a clinical analyst role. And I ended up being the tech lead, or the clinical tech lead of a project team for acute care services. And from there, I remember sitting at a lot of meetings, and good God, these meetings were brutal. So to Tatiana's point about rigid bureaucracy, I remember it was once a week, starting at Monday, 8 a.m. for 2.5 hours. And they were doing a walkthrough of all of the EMR and EHR proposed changes from every single department. And that interdisciplinary committee was responsible for deciding whether or not that made the most sense. So if I wanted to change out a group of orders, how it's bundled together, the timing of it, that it all has to kind of feed through that. And then of course, it's not just one meeting. So then there's another meeting that says, okay, well, this is an oncology order set. So we need the oncologists and oncology nurses involved. And it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? You want the people that are involved to be involved. And then there's also it makes the most sense, it's evidence-based practice, we should include it, why isn't it done yesterday? So then you end up having to kind of negotiate all of that. So in a way, my role there was like a negotiator, right? Can we do this? Yes, great, and then bring it to another place. And then I wanted to really get a good understanding of how these projects come together, right? So it's not just enough to say, okay, well, today I'm going to make a revision in the oncology order set, but then let's think about long-term, right? If I added one more field tomorrow and the day after, then I just end up with a never-ending scroll where I can't find anything of any template, right? And it's brutal. It's awful. The experience of having to go through that as an end user is brutal. Your mind is crazy. You're trying to dedicate more of your time for patient care, right, in that scenario. And then the data you get out is actually kind of crappy too, because it's just this never-ending copy paste of data from yesterday, or the yesterday's labs, or the day before yesterday's labs, that are just all imported in. So long story short, I did end up at Northwell Health, where I was a project manager there. I got PMP certified, and the first task they gave me, of course, was to, hey, we have 3 to 4 months. We would like you to launch in-house pharmacy. It's the second of its kind, but we want it at this location. So I worked with a different set of, instead of inpatient, I'm now outpatient and working with pharmacy to make sure that their apps, even the software and the hardware, was kind of all there. So you can kind of see that you think going in that it's just like a bedside type of nursing is just really bedside, and you go in kind of thinking like that too. But there's really a plethora of routes, and in this case, I ended up doing that. So I got into project management, and again, looking at the budget, assigning resources, and it's a totally different side of the house, right? So what you end up doing is the folks that you end up starting to work with, either the executives or vendors, don't truly embrace a lot of what I call the nuances of bedside care, or the realities of seeking healthcare services, especially in New York, right? With whatever, how it is. So what ended up happening was it was successful. We barely made it. We showed up at 10 p.m. the night before just to make sure our cash registers were working. And it was great. But that took way longer than I really thought it was. I know it sounds like a short period of time, but I had to jump through a lot of hoops to get there too. So to Tatiana's theme about there's some rigidity in the things that you want to change really quickly, you really, at least for me, I wanted a place that was a little bit more fast paced. And up until that point, all I was familiar with was like a hospital setting. So I said, what's the worst that could happen if I, started applying to healthcare startups? And what I found was that a majority of startups that seek out folks like us need a translator. So in my bio, I did put that I'm a translator, and that's all I've been doing. That you take your real life experiences at the bedside, at the hospital, at a clinic, of what have you, and even in quality, compliance, education, and then you kind of explain it to people that have never done it before, but they've been consumers of it, but had never had to distribute that service. And you kind of negotiate what actually makes the most sense, right? Are you trying to capture my insights? Okay, great. But then you realize you have to have patient consent. You have to have all these other myriad of things that you have to cover. So a startup reached out to me, a company by the name of Metal, that was really doing some innovative stuff when it comes to extracting insights out of a medical record. They were doing what I call reverse alchemy. So you have really good data, or good enough data, coming out of Epic, Allscripts, Cerner, what have you, any EMR, And what they were trying to do was, well, it's great, but it's kind of locked up, you know, in their own app orchard or their APIs and things like that. But what if we could pull out and actually use machine learning or AI, artificial intelligence, to start pulling out medical entities, words that you could pull out to stitch together highlights of what this patient came in with. So if I had like an index card, for example, you would have, oh, here's, you know, John Smith, who had, you know, a, I don't know, angina that came in for that. And, oh, they had heart disease medication that came with it, and highlight all of those things without actually necessarily seeking out the vendor, Epic, Allscripts, or Cerner, but rather partnering with the hospital. And then they in turn could consume that information and, you know, build a dashboard, for example, or build things like that. So we started, I think, so they started way before me. I was, I think, their 20th hire at that point. And then it was super scrappy. I think at one point I might have shown Joanna like how rundown our office was. It was literally like someone's house that they gutted to create a little garage, and we worked in there. But we did get funding, and people believed in this dream, this very ambitious dream. But the technology that we built behind it was really then, there's a machine learning model that it gets smarter each time you kind of feed it more data and understand the chart. And then, you know, and there's also the whole taking what a picture is and then converting it into words. So in a way, our technology was kind of what a lot of these big companies are doing today, AWS or Amazon, Google, you've heard of them trying to dabble in Google Health, things like that. So, you know, we were trying to do our own proprietary thing, and a company called Ciox Health found us and said, you know, what you guys are doing or embarking on is pretty amazing. We were able to, we did a compare at one point, and we actually performed a little bit better than AWS Comprehend, which is the competing product. And so they said, why don't you join our team? And it is a much bigger organization. And I serve the same role where I'm not only trying to put together the product roadmap, trying to figure out, okay, what clinical features do we want to capture? So that same oncology medication, that order set, can we use machine learning to actually detect the words and the medications that come out of it? We are also trying to test out whether or not we can pull out oncology genes, like genetic profiles of patients that have presented into the hospital or clinic at one point. And so at the end of everything, I serve as the VP of product. And what we realized is you can't really, it's hard to translate to folks that are, you know, purely technical and whatever, but you have to have this empathy to really explain to them, hey, you know, this is not how you would treat a visit date, right? An encounter date. You can't just assume that if there's a lab one day and a lab the next, that they're just one visit or two different visits, but X, Y, and Z. So my role is really just making sure, and still is forevermore, however long healthcare is in play, just really empathizing with the workflow and of course, making sure that folks really understand how it's done in the real world.
Thank you, Vanessa. That's a lot of passion around information. That's, you know, and information, and, using data to make a difference. You know, it's really, I think the power of artificial intelligence is going to have a significant impact on, you know, the future of our health, the future on how we deliver health. So that's really exciting that you're on sort of that leading. I don't think it's, I would still say it's leading edge. It's not, you know, a big part of what we're doing now, but the potential is huge. And with everything being digitized, the amount of data we're collecting and mining, you know, is 10 times every day, or it's becoming exponential. So, so good to see nurses involved in helping to shape the impact of that in the future. So,
yeah. And and even if we don't end up, let's say, necessarily getting into the technical side of the house, I think as nurses, we can absolutely advocate and stay really strong to, you know, it's a lot of noise. A medical record has a lot of noise, whether it's historical, you know. I remember we found like a snippet of like 4 pages that just talked about someone's maternal family history, like, and it was totally irrelevant to the patient. And so if you only had like a very technology driven focus, you end up missing out on the fact, or incorrectly assuming that half the data is actually just for their mom, right? It's not actually the patient themselves. So yeah, I definitely echo that sentiment.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to keep the why with data. And I think quite often we get lost in the what, like it's got all this stuff that
Exactly.
with, but it was really staying focused on the why. And especially as we move towards more AI, where what we want to get to is like predictions. We want to be able to, you know,
Exactly.
ahead of a disease or get ahead of a wound getting out of control. And we want to get to personalized medicine, like, you know,
Exactly. Yeah.
stuff is, it needs clinicians at those tables to keep that why in the front of us.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you. Joanna, was there any questions? I wasn't following the.
Yeah, Charlene had a question. Charlene, do you want me to read off the chat or do you want to jump in?
Oh, sure. Vanessa, thank you so much for sharing your insights, and just hearing you and Tatiana just makes me think maybe I should have been an informaticist, but but I was wondering, how did you first become involved in the first startup before you were all acquired? Did they approach you or did you apply? I'm just interested in how those opportunities come into nursing sometimes.
Yeah, I can't stress how important a network like this really comes into play. You know, Sanciel and others similar to it, but for other professions are also dedicated to informatics. I know like medical informatics is also another strong wheelhouse over there. And, you know, we're all tackling the same issues. So in a way, it was a mix. I did go to HIMSS, which is the Health Informatics Management Systems Society. And there I did reach out to a few people just to kind of say, hey, you know, what are you doing? Tell me about what you're up to. It was so simple. It was like an email. And I was like, chances are they're going to ghost me, but you know, what are the chances that someone's going to actually reply and do like a quick, you know, coffee chat and whatnot. They usually have either guest speakers or, you know, folks that lead certain network groups that are part of that. So once I did talk to somebody, they were like, hey, have you know, seen Angels List, which is a website that is dedicated for either pre-series A companies trying to look for resources. So, you know, they said, hey, have you heard about this company called Metal? I think they're hiring. And I said, what? Where would I find them? I don't see them anywhere. This is really, really suspect. So I ended up reaching out and seeing Angels List and then just applying. And then they were like, oh, we've heard of you from so-and-so at HIMSS. And I said, oh, fancy that. So that's how it got started.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I'll put the angel one in the chat too. I will say before we go over to Charlene's story too, that Vanessa was really badass and brave, because when she went into her project management professional certification, the PMP, she felt like she really wanted to do agile project management, which at the time really wasn't practiced that much in hospitals. So in order to be able to get her like teeth into and sink her teeth into a place where she could do that, she just like left healthcare for a little while and went into, was it a HR?
Yeah, I went into HR software. You know, it was like this rinky-dinky role, but they were like, hey, we're looking for project managers. We need to basically get the engineering team in shape. And I was like, oh, I know how to get people to try and do what we want them to do. And it helped me practice a little bit. So it was, yeah, it was, I totally like left that out because I was just like,
Well, I'm only bringing it up because I think that, you know, sometimes in order to find something that you don't know how to find, you sort of have to get to like the nearest thing and like the closest, most adjacent thing to that thing. And so she was able to find a role within Agile and within project management that she couldn't find within the hospital. And then because she was able to have that role, then when she went back into like a healthcare startup, she now had this whole new skill set that she couldn't have found knocking on hospital doors. So kind of taking the circuitous route sometimes can allow you to get experience that you're looking for.
Yeah, and then if you need like a positive vibes or encouragement, we as nurses have those skills, honestly. It's just a matter of kind of curating them in a way that says like, no, what you want me to do is something that I already know how to do in terms of coordination, resourcing, budgeting, delegating, prioritization. It's all in our skill set. It's in our toolbox. So, knocking on doors has definitely really helped me out with regards to that. So.
Excellent.
So to introduce Charlene, I'll say that I met her through the J&J Nurse Innovation Fellowship, and I am so impressed because she has like everyone else on the call, like she has just like lily padded back and forth into all these different roles, and she takes like this giant toolkit with her. But she's currently the Director of Ambulatory Nursing in Stanford, which I think is a unique role within nursing because so often we think about nursing as more of an inpatient thing. So she's getting this whole outpatient perspective. And then through a hackathon last year, she co-founded the Fifth Window Nurse Wellness and Resiliency digital platform. So I will pass the mic over to you, Charlene.
Thank you so much, Joanna, and thank you, Mary Lou and Sanciel, for having me. I'm really honored to be presenting alongside Tatiana and Vanessa, and it's so great to hear everyone's stories. And just in addition to what Joanna mentioned, I have had many unique roles in nursing, and it's just interesting because a lot of them kind of fell into my lap, and I feel like a lot of nurses can say that about their journeys as well. And that's the case, that was really the case for me in terms of my leadership journey. And I do wear a few different hats, but in terms of leadership, I had started, I had gotten into nursing at first because I come from a family of nurses. So my mother's an ICU nurse, my twin sister is a psychiatric nurse, and it was great hearing about Vanessa's story with psychiatric nursing because I'm an identical twin, and my twin sister never wanted to go into medical nursing, and I never had ventured into psychiatrics. I always thought that was funny. But so as I was journeying into nursing at the bedside, I was an ICU nurse and a telemetry nurse. And one of the things that I just, constantly found in my journey is that, I always found myself in informal leadership positions from, stemming from my time in undergraduate all the way up until when I was a bedside nurse. And then when I was a bedside nurse, just being able to see patterns and see challenges at the bedside really led me to the path of innovation. And I didn't realize it was innovation at the time. So I'm really glad. The first time I heard of it as innovation was actually during Rebecca Love's talk in 2019 about nurse-led innovation. And that was just such a light bulb that popped into my head. And I was like, oh my gosh, it is innovation. So I really wanted to solve problems and help with patient experiences. And so that really led me into the journey of pursuing, after being a bedside nurse for a few years, I pursued my nurse practitioner license. And in my nurse practitioner school for my graduate school, there was a class that I took, and it was about performance improvement and leadership. And I loved everything that was mentioned in that class. And I was really engrossed in being able to help with quality improvement, the performance improvement. And it really led me to want to pursue management full time if that was a possibility. And so, just as it was interesting because by the time I was graduating from my NP school, I had two different opportunities. I was accepted into a nurse practitioner residency program in primary care, and it was with the underserved population, and that was really the population I loved to work with and I loved to serve. But then I also had an opportunity to work as a manager of advanced practice at Stanford Health Care, working directly with inpatient nurse practitioners and physician assistants. And it was a really hard decision because I loved both of those options, but I knew that I wanted to pursue leadership in the long term. So I went with the management option, and I haven't regretted it. And that was how I got into my first formal leadership role. And it was only just last year in April 2020 when I transitioned to my Director of Ambulatory Nursing role. And it's been so great because it's really still new territory for ambulatory nursing and to have our presence in the outpatient side. And it's been really great to see the difference between inpatient and outpatient and the roles and scope of practice in nursing. And so that's how I've ventured into that area. But you know, if anyone has any questions too, feel free to place it in the chat. And you know, with innovation, I had always been innovating throughout my career as a bedside nurse. But then when I was accepted into the Johnson & Johnson Nurse Innovation Fellowship, I really felt like I found my niche. And meeting other nurses like Joanna, meeting other nurses like all of you here in San Ciel, I really felt like I found my tribe. And finally, this is like my squad of nurses, and this is who I really wanted to surround myself with. And I was like, yes. So I was really excited to be in the fellowship. And then, you know, with the pandemic, I just knew, you know, I found out about the Nurse Hack for Health last year in May 2020. And that was how I came to join the hackathon, or that Nurse Hack for Health. And I joined a team with Chris Caulfield, who is another nurse entrepreneur that you all might know. He's the Chief Nursing Officer of IntelliCare. And we started a team within the Resiliency and Self-Care Challenge of the hackathon. And my team and I, we were really fortunate to win that challenge. And I see that Kathy's on the line too. She's also one of the co-founders for Fifth Window. We were formerly called WellNurse, but now it's pretty much our 1 year anniversary now. I can't believe it. It's already 1 year since that hackathon in May 2020. And we went from, you know, having our idea and the proposal during the hackathon last year to now, which we were able to, you know, narrow our team to 4 co-founders. So it's myself, Kathy Schaefer, Jillian Littlefield, and then we added a developer, Michael Horn, to our team. So now we're at the point where we are launching our beta test. It's actually, it launched on May 6th. So just last week at the start of National Nurses Week, and we are offering it for free for nurses up until the end of the month, May 31st. So if anyone's interested, you're all invited. You could go to fifthwindow.com, FIFTH window.com, and you could join in. It's available for Android and iPhone phones. But anyway, I'll just stop there because I've been talking a lot. So sorry.
Well, that's an exciting finish of that. You know, that's amazing. A year from now, or a year ago, it was an idea, and now you're into beta testing. And I remember your pitch session at last year's Hack for Health. So congratulations. I'm super excited for you and what you're doing. And so what, maybe just talk a little bit about that journey, you know, finishing the hackathon and then getting to here. What was sort of maybe share a couple lessons learned, or maybe say what was the 2 most important things you did, and maybe a couple things that you probably didn't need to do. Or that were.
I feel like, yeah. I feel like, and Kathy's on this call too. I feel like she could also share some lessons that we've learned over this past year. And I do think that it's really important to find co-founders who are equally passionate about the mission, because our mission is to revolutionize nursing well-being. And I feel like having this mission really holds us together and really moves us forward, because, you know, I have a lot of friends who have pursued startups in the past, and a lot of them, you know, a year later are not continuing on that path anymore. And it's a really hard journey. I mean, it's really tough to have an idea, to build a product, to make it go to market, and to have people test it, use it, purchase it. There's a lot of components, and you really don't know what you don't know until you just go on the journey. And luckily there's more resources now, just like what Aaliyah Aaron is building with the Nursing Innovation Hub. And of course with what Sanciel is offering, so that's amazing. And I think that people should really take advantage of those resources. Something that we learned, my co-founders and I, is that there's actually a lot of resources out there, and a lot of people really want to help nurses. So, we were really fortunate. We've been bootstrapping this entire past year. We're still in the process of seeking funding and capital, but since nurses are super creative and super resourceful, we found so many resources without having to spend much money.
Nice.
So I feel like use your resources, use your network, use your skills, meet people in this call, meet people on LinkedIn. Oh, definitely go on LinkedIn. It's great. That's where I find like all my connections and opportunities and a lot of different things. That's also where I found out about the Nursing Innovation Fellowship, just FYI. But I think that was one lesson learned. And another lesson learned is, even if you face rejections, that's part of the startup journey. And I heard that, if you hear a no, don't take that as a no, take that as a not yet. And I think that's really helped me to strive to, to keep moving forward, even though the news could be really hard sometimes about, a rejection for some sort of opportunity. There will always be more opportunities. And that's the same for nursing too. So I think that as long as nurses keep that in mind, that will really help you move forward with your goals.
Excellent. Great. Thank you. Were there any other questions in the chat, Joanna?
It looks like Julia has a question for Charlene. If you see innovative models of care on the nurse's role as a path to well-being for nurses.
Yeah, sorry, could you repeat that? Oh, do I see innovative models of care on the nurse's role? Yeah, so I think that when it comes to models of care for nursing, when it comes to well-being, I think there's a lot of room for opportunity there. And I do think that nurses should really be part of these models and part of these conversations for well-being. I'm trying to think of, any specific models, but, a lot of nurses, especially during this pandemic, and actually what my co-founder, Kathy Schaefer, has been part of has been, she's been really involved in peer-to-peer focus groups when it comes to supporting nurses who've been working on the front lines for the pandemic. There's a lot of nurses who have been part of innovations when it comes to well-being. And I do think that there is still a lot more to be done. There was actually a survey that was done, and I can't remember the exact source, but they found that 95% of nurses who were surveyed about the efficacy of programs that were currently in place to reduce burnout in their hospitals were not effective. So 95% of nurses said that current programs were not effective in reducing burnout. So we do have a lot of opportunities, and I think that it's partially because nurses haven't really been involved in those conversations in the past. And that's what we really want to bridge with Fifth Window is really having nurses as part of the decision-making table, but also knowing what will work for nurses and trying to actually have them access those resources. Because even with currently existing programs like employee assistance programs, only about 5.5% of employees utilize those programs, including counseling, and that goes for all employers that have EAP programs. So there's a lot of room for improvement. Hopefully I answered the question. I'm sorry if I didn't.
That's good. Okay, great. Well, thank you, Charlene and Vanessa and Tatiana. Those were all great stories, and I think it just opens our eyes to opportunities for nurses and the different pathways that we can all take. And I think what's evident in all three of your stories, it's driven by passion. It's finding something that you believe in or a change that you want to make and making it happen, figuring out ways to make it happen. So it's not easy. They're not always easy roads, but I think they're very fulfilling as a in your career to be able to have some of those challenges put in front of you and then have the success of breaking down those barriers and making it happen. So thanks so much for sharing your stories. It's great. So at this point, Marion, we want to open it up to
Yeah,
general discussion.
sure. And so this will be our, my on mute. Okay, this will be our open networking time. So if anybody has questions, comments, wants to share any, any news they have, this time is for you. So if you want to either use the raised hand button or just come in off of mute, happy to hear you. And I don't know, maybe while people are deciding if they want to share or not, we could mention some of the upcoming events that SunCL has going on. Obviously, this weekend is the Nurse Hack for Health, which is sponsored by Johnson & Johnson, Microsoft, DevUp, and of course, SunCL. It will run tomorrow night, kicks off at 6 p.m. and runs through Sunday afternoon. It is a free event open to all nurses, designers, engineers, other healthcare providers, anybody who's interested in solving problems around the pandemic. So if you're interested in participating in a nurse hackathon, I highly recommend checking it out this weekend. There's still time to register. I threw the link in the chat a couple times. It is an amazing experience. Creative people coming up with creative solutions to the problems they're seeing on the front lines and beyond. And lots of people on here have participated, are participating. Obviously, you heard Charlene's story. So a lot of great relationships and opportunities can come from these Nurse Hack for Health hackathons.
Yeah, and I think if you have never participated in one and you don't even really have an idea or something that you want, you should still join, because you'll join a team. Like you'll pick a team to join. There will be a whole bunch of them. You figure out which one you have an interest in, and just going through that process over the weekend is a huge learning experience and a great opportunity to network with a whole 500 or 600 people participating. So yeah, you definitely want to join if you can.
Yeah, currently we have over 600 people participating from 18 countries around the globe. It could actually be more than that. That was as of like this morning or yesterday. So should be a great time. Mary Lou, do you want to mention the pitch event and the Drexel?
Sure. Actually, I'll jump in with the Drexel one,
Okay.
first, which is the actually Julie's on. Julie, maybe you can speak to the Drexel one. Is coming up after. The first is Hackathon this weekend, and then the weekend of
Yes.
June and 6th is the Drexel program.
Yes, excited. So SunCL and Drexel University are hosting a certificate program on the weekend of June 5th and 6th, and it is through Drexel's School of Entrepreneurship. And this is a program really targeted for nurses on entrepreneurship and innovation. And this is both with innovation and entrepreneurship, both outside of an organization as well as inside of an organization. So how do you innovate within this, inside the walls of an organization, and how do you innovate and be an entrepreneur outside the walls, similar to what we heard Charlene talk about. So both what Mary Lou does inside an organization around innovation and what Charlene did around a product outside. So we think this is a really wonderful opportunity for nurses to get a certificate in this area. There will be, which is kind of fun, there will be sponsorships and scholarships given at the end of the Nurse Hack for Health for about 20 individuals to attend the program. But you can also sign up for the program yourself. Just go to suncl.org and you will see it under sponsorships. And we would be delighted to have you join. It's a wonderful program.
And I just threw the link in the chat again.
Thank you. You're way ahead of me.
Okay, and I also see that the pitch event link is there as well. So this is an event we're organizing for nurse entrepreneurs who are SunCL members who have a company that has gone beyond sort of the friend and family funding. So they're looking for their next series of funding. And there's some specific criteria that's on the website as far as how far along you need to be to qualify to be a pitcher at the event. And we will have probably 4 or 5 venture capitalists or investors who will be there. So it's almost like a Shark Tank type of event where you'll be selected to participate, and then you'll be given a certain amount of time to pitch your company. And then those investors, if they are interested, we'll continue to work with you beyond the event. But for other SONSIEL members who aren't in that position to do that yet, but would like to observe the event, it'll be open to the membership to participate and see what it's like to pitch to investors. So that's June 15th, I believe. And the link is in the SONSIEL website. So you can register just to be just to be a viewer, an audience, or one of the entrepreneurs, one of the organizations who's looking for some investment.
Great. And with that, I think Barb has their hand up. So Barb, if you have a question.
I just wanted to say that I was listening to Vanessa's story and about agile project management. And so I wanted to let you know that there's a pre-conference for project management, a 4-hour one right before the CINE conference, the Informatics Nursing Conference that's this summer. So I posted that link there if anybody is interested in doing some more project management figuring out. And certainly they're going to be talking about agile project management. So I just wanted to share that. And this is my first meetup, and I'm registered for this weekend, so I'm excited.
Sweet.
Nice.
Well, thank you for sharing. Thank you for attending the meetup. Thank you for registering for the hackathon. Happy to have you at all of these things. Others with questions, comments, connections needed, resources needed? How can we help? Oh, go ahead, Holly.
Hi, I'm Holly Shaw, and among other things, I represent the International Council of Nurses at the United Nations. And my greatest passion is to generate a cadre of nurses to infuse the United Nations system. It's kind of slow, and I need to somehow develop it into a job because I'm convinced that we need to organize in a certain way. But I'm a psych mental health nurse, and I want to put in a plug for the hackathon and everything else. I'm recovering from a bilateral mastectomy followed by an infection and other surgeries. So I had 4 surgeries in 4 weeks. And my assistant just left a while ago, and she said, and I've been working all day at new UN Zoom meetings. And she said, I hope you're going to go lie down now. And I said, oh no, I have a SONSIEL meetup. And she said, what are you doing? And I said, you know what? This is real burnout prevention, not taking a bath, not polishing my nails, not, but doing something, I have goosebumps now, that stirs passion. And I think that last year in April at the hackathon, the idea of spending a whole weekend, devoting an entire weekend to work at the hackathon when we were all depleted and exhausted was unfathomable to so many people, but it was so invigorating and exciting and provided everything that one needs when we're feeling diminished and depleted. And so it sounds like a lot of time, it sounds like more work, it sounds a bit overwhelming, but I would encourage everyone, because this is where we get our juice. Hopefully we get rewards while we're working and a lot of professional satisfaction. But as Charlene indicated, this is where we find our tribe, and that really feeds us. And whether you're a listener or a talker or a doer or a watcher, being in the presence of such dynamic excitement is very healthy and wonderful and invigorating. So I would encourage everyone to do it.
Thank you, Holly. Those words are so timely and so true. I feel the exact same way. It's almost like I get to fill my gas tank up again at the end of all of these connections that we make. And we did want to make special mention of it being Nurses Week, and thank all of the nurses that for the difference that they make. I think this year's theme is frontline warriors, and they describe nurses as persons who are strong enough to tolerate anything, but soft enough to understand anyone. And certainly our strength and our resilience this year has been tested more than my whole career. And we're still not through it. We're still, fighting the strong fight every day. And The stories have been phenomenal that have come out about the value of nurses and the impact that we're making in all of our roles. So, you know, keep moving forward, and you know, go on the fifth window, I think it was .com, to see if there's something if you need that extra boost. But we do want to thank all the nurses and the difference. So thank you. We are going to give out a few door prizes to celebrate Nurses Week. So the way we're going to do this on this event here is I have written down a number, and you have to take your birth month and your birth date, add those two numbers together. So you don't have to put the year in. So just the month and the date, add those two numbers together and put them in the chat. And the three people who come closest to that number will send one of our books, which is the Rebel Nurses Handbook. It's inspirational stories from shift disruptors, which are a number of us who are Sansiel members and founders wrote our story in the book, as well as one of our Sansiel mugs. All right.
While folks are doing that, do you mind if I go to Robert, who has his hand up?
Oh, sure. Yeah, that would be great.
Great, thank you. This has been awesome because some of you people I've listened to podcasts and seen other stories and stuff, and just the collection of people that are doing amazing stuff right now is just phenomenal. So just a little bit about me. I was actually an oncology nurse in a previous career, but I've actually been in informatics for about 24 years now, with 22 of that being in nurse staffing and scheduling. And I'm just going to put this out there to see if anybody might be able to help me. About 5 years ago, I started really intensively analyzing nursing FTE budgets, variances, and impacts on productivity and staffing. And I believe I've actually identified a flaw in a very popular nursing budget methodology. It actually results in about a 2 to 2.5% shortfall on needed FTEs. So on a unit that should have 50 FTEs, it comes out to be about 45 hours, which is 3 1/4 or 12-hour shifts per week that they'd be short. The problem is that everybody I've approached with this flaw looks at the methodology and says, but we've always done it that way. And so I've actually spoken with Dr. Bonnie Clipper, and she gave me a name of somebody at HFMA that I'm going to reach out to. But I believe I've actually developed a mathematical framework that actually allows for some pretty interesting modeling and predicting that would help to provide some, I think, clarity and transparency in staffing and scheduling. Because what I've seen is typically, you know, you get a budget and you say, okay, you get this much extra to cover for, you know, education time and time off, and et cetera. But what typically happens is that I've seen in a lot of facilities is they don't really have a good understanding of month to month, how much time can they really schedule for non-patient care activities. And so they may think, well, I can schedule, you know, 10% of my staff, but they don't really have enough to do that. And so they'll go and they'll approve all of this education, time off, and then it further gets impacted by leave and orientation. And what happens is they do that and they kind of overspend on that, and then they put what they have left over at the bedside. So like I said, I've got this mathematical framework. I've actually got a tool that would allow managers to look, you know, month by month, and looking at their position control and some other operational variables, they could fairly accurately calculate each month, well, I can give this much time off. And so it's a more sort of detailed look at their budget. But in order to use these tools, it would involve fixing the flawed formula in this very popular budget methodology that many experts have made their careers on. Many consultants are still out there teaching this methodology. So if anybody knows anybody that's, you know, maybe an expert in this space, or or might be willing to listen and actually sit down and watch me walk through the calculations, I would really appreciate any insights or links that you guys might happen to have.
How can we reach you, Robert? I'm not sure, but I might know somebody.
I will put up my post my LinkedIn profile. You guys can definitely hit me up there.
Robert, it's Julia Cooney. I've done work in my past life. I'm one of those consultants. Would love to get a look at what you've got. Would be very keen. So I'm going to put my email in the text and connect with me.
Okay, and I will throw my email down there as well.
Love this. I love when we make connections.
Mm.
Who else needs connections? Oh, what? Sorry, go ahead, Mary Lou.
Well, we have winners. So our 3 winners are, the number was 26. And our 3 winners are Gifty, Kara, and Joanna. I believe that's the numbers I can see that are the closest to 26. So if the 3 of you can send an email to Faith, put it in the chat with your address, and we will be sending you off a door prize. So happy Nurses Week, everybody.
Great. Congrats, you 3. Enjoy your read. Your summer read is the Rebel Nurse Handbook.
Yes. And if I got that wrong, just send me a note, but it certainly looked like those are the 3 names closest.
So other people, we have like 9 minutes left. Any comments, thoughts you'd like to address?
Hi.
I think we're good. I don't see anything. And
Hey, I'm on a call here.
okay, so maybe on that note then, we will finish a few minutes early. And again, thank you to our 3 speakers tonight. Really appreciated you sharing your stories. And it's nice that the weather seems to be turning a little bit brighter for all of us. And I think our outlook getting through this pandemic is also getting brighter. So, you know, till our next event, which is tomorrow, you can join us, and we'll get a few extra more rests before the hackathon starts. It's going to be so much fun. Hope to see some of you there.
Just a reminder, tomorrow night is our kickoff, and we do have Rear Admiral, I'm forgetting her last name, from the
Mix.
She's terrific. She's really terrific.
Yeah, from the United States Public Health Service, who will be doing our keynote talk. So you won't want to miss that either.
Yeah, it's gonna be awesome.
Great. Well, thank you all so much.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.